Dear friends, I want to speak a few words about God's righteousness and about the unrighteousness which we see in the world and how do they relate to each other. Have you ever wondered, dear friend, when you read the Bible, that, for example, when you read the Old Testament, that you see so many judgments, so many punishments from the side of God. You can see this in the Bible, in the prophets. You can see this in Exodus when God releases Israel from Egypt, and you can wonder, what is this? Is this a God of love? When we see so many punishments in the Bible, you think, oh no, why? We see in the New Testament a God of love. We see Christ who bears the sin of the world, who is crucified, God in flesh. And we see Christ, the God of love, crucified for us. And we are prone to differentiate this Old Testament from New Testament. We see in the New Testament often we see a God of love, of mercy, of grace, and we are trying to avoid the Old Testament as thinking this is too much blood. This is too much punishment, too much judgment, too much vengeance. Oh no, I don't want that. But is that fair? Is that fair? Is that fair from our side? Think a little bit deeper. Think a little bit deeper, dear friend, to all those people who are in the world, who are weak, who are poor, and think about the exploitations in the world, about the young girls who were raped by men systematically. Think about the Holocaust. Think about what has happened to the Jews. The banishment of those Jews and the systematic punishments and the concentration camps and all those things which had occurred to them. And all the things which had occurred to them, and all these high officials who are spewing on the Jews and who are making jokes, cutting their limbs or something, or making jokes, making fun of human flesh, making and putting them to all the shame and misery. Dear friends, when we are looking to these injustices in the world, what kind of God we have? What kind of word does it comes into our minds when we see to all those injustices? Think about the poor children who are exploited in the mines. Think about the widows, the extortion of the widows, extortion of the poor. And think about all those bossy men who are in high positions and are looking down to people and are getting richer and richer on their backs. Exploitation. What kind of world is this? And do you think, dear friend, that this people, this man or woman who are doing such horrible things to the poor or to the widows or to the other people who are not in high positions, do you think that they are coming through life unpunished? if there is a God, oh my God, if there is a God, where is the punishment of God towards these injustices in the world which are now happening? Oh, are the Hitlers in this world go unpunished or not? Think about, if we only think God is love and we don't think about a God of justice, how do these victims, how do they feel? How do they feel in the inner core when have been exploited, raped, lived upon their backs and exploited and etc., etc.? How do they feel? What kind of feeling they have? If God is only a God of love and He permits these things to go on forever, and there will be no judgment in the future, not at all, not a hell where the punishment will be structured and crystallized, what kind of God should we have if God is only a God of love? The word which comes into my mind, dear friend, is the word justice. Justice, justice, justice. When I read through the Old Testament, I want to look at the Old Testament, for example, through a filter, through glasses. And I put my glasses on, and my glasses are justice. God is a God of justice, not only of love, but also a God of justice. Therefore, if God is justice, He must punish the unjust. He must punish the exploiters, the dictators, the men and women who have spewed about on the Jews or on the other people, not only the Jews, but also other nationalities of groups of people, doesn't matter. But against this discrimination, there has to be a God of justice who stands up and, like a lion, He stands up to judge the world. Because if we look at the Bible only through the glasses of love, and we say, oh, God is love, so He doesn't look at these things, because God is love, and He will cover up all those injustices, and He is not looking to this. No, they are going unpunished, they are going just away, they are forgiven, they are absorbed into a sea of grace. If we are looking only this way, if we are looking to the Bible or to the Old Testament only through the glasses of love, of grace, and not through the glasses of justice, then we are naive, dear friends. And how should they feel, all those who have been done injustice, exploited? Do you understand that these people will cry out in their graves, and these raped people of this, or this exploited little children in the mines, will come up and say, oh God, why are they living in their luxury mansions and eating their meat lambs, and are getting older and older, feasting and living so long? And we, Lord, we had to work, and unjustly and we were exploited and raped and spewed upon and shamed continuously and systematically and structurally. Oh God, they will shake in their graves and see, God, we want justice. We want justice. It's not possible that this world goes on only with a God of love. Love requires justice. It's like a coin which has two sides, a side of grace, a side of love, and a side of justice. Because in the Old Testament, dear friends, God is called, is named also God of justice. He is Jahweh Tsidkenu. Jahweh Tsidkenu, God my justice, the Lord of my justice, Jahweh Tsidkenu. This is one of his names which he is called upon in the Old Testament. And I have chosen, I have some difficulties, I sincerely still have, when I read the Old Testament and see all these murderings, all this kind of disasters. For example, when we see in Amos 3 verse 6, when a trumpet sounds in a city, do not the people tremble? When disaster comes to a city, has not the Lord caused it? Disaster is sometimes caused by God, by the Lord of hosts, but because he is a God of justice, not a whimsical justice and a willing to punish from nothing, or whimsical injustice, and God is a God who has intrinsically goodness in himself, and he's just in himself. He does not punish whimsically. But the God, it is in his nature to have and to act in justice and in love. Because justice and love, two sides of the same coin, as I said, are intrinsically related in the nature of God. In the nature of God, they are present there. Therefore, dear friends, I have chosen, as I said, when I look at the Old Testament, I say, yes, there are murderings, there are disasters sent by the Lord, as I read from the Bible. There are things which God sends, punishments, disasters, sword, but these are not sent in vain, as a man who sits on the couch and says, "Oh, I will do some foolish thing in just I have a desire to do it and I do it." No, dear friend, God is God, and he is good and he is just in himself. He is good and he is just in himself, and he does not punish in this manner, but he also punishes justly. He punishes justly in righteousness, dear friend, because he is Jahweh Tsidkenu, the God of my righteousness, the God of my righteousness, and he will come up for me. If I will be abused by people, he will come up for me, if not in this world, in the next world, because there will be a judgment. As the New Testament says, there will be a heaven and a hell, and there will be also the judgment seat of Christ. And besides that, there will be the judgment of the whole of all the people, in which God will justly punish or reward for good behavior. And again, I have chosen, when I read all that blood and all that stuff of justice, of punishment, in the Bible, I have chosen to put my glasses on. And I have chosen to see the Old Testament through these glasses of justice. And the book of Amos says that, for example, in Amos 5 verse 24, but let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. And this is a very kind of verse which is at my heart. But let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. That is the heart of God. And the backdrop of this is that God has said that in chapter 4, verse 1, for example, hear this word, you cows of Bashan on Mount Samaria, you woman who oppress the poor and crush the needy. And in chapter 8, verse 4, Amos says, hear this, you who trample the needy and do away the poor of the land. This requires justice. And when we read this, the exploitation of the world and what they are doing, some people on the back of the other, then we read and we put again our glasses on. This requires justice, dear friend. Otherwise, they will tremble. They will come out of their graves and cry out, God, God of justice. And the spectacles, the glass, what I put on to all these injustices is this dear verse of mine. But let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. Oh, this is inspiring, dear friends. This is inspiring because this inspires me to see that God is a God of justice. He will stand up for those needy who were exploited, for those poor who were devoured. And we also read in Amos chapter 6 verse 12, do horses run on the rocky crags? Does one plow the sea with oxen? But you have turned justice into poison and the fruit of righteousness into bitterness. God requires that we are like Him, that we love justice as He loves justice. We don't have to turn the justice into poison and the fruit of righteousness into bitterness. But we, dear friends, have to pray for the oppressed, for the needy, for the poor, for the widows, for the children, for the abused, for the victims of rape. We have to pray, dear friend. We have to focus on them. We have to spread our wings out of prayer and say, God, you are a God of justice. So we have to do something, because when we do not anything, when we do nothing, that is also injustice. Righteousness requires that we, as God Himself, we pray for the needy and we help the needy. We act like God, to become like God, to like on Him. And therefore, dear friends, once again, I read these two verses. They are the two sides of my glass, through which I look at the verses from the Old Testament, which shows how much that God sometimes sends the sword or punishes, or when I look into this world and I see how many victims of injustice are, this requires a justice in the future, a judgment, when God says, it's enough, and I will judge justly. And again, I say, as I conclude, but let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never failing stream. But you have turned justice into poison and the fruit of righteousness into bitterness. Let us not turn the justice into poison, dear friends, and let justice roll out like a river from our hearts, through our words, through our acts, to the needy, and like a never fading stream, so that we will like our God, who is Jahweh Tsidkenu, the God of our righteousness, the God of our righteousness, Jahweh Tsidkenu.